One of the most essential aspects to being a successful entrepreneur is being able to clear your mind and operate with a sense of clarity. Having the ability to not only avoid mental fatigue, but also to make clear and calculated decisions, even when it's the 12th hour of a workday, is paramount to operating at peak performance. Well, our guest today is going to give you the tips, tricks, and tools to not only achieve those two things, but to also avoid what he calls digital amnesia, as well as employ a strategy known as digital fasting to block out the noise and stay on top of your game. Stick around, this information-packed episode is one you won't want to miss.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performance Podcast
with your host, Thor Conklin.
Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy.
Today's guest is Dr. Anthony Metivier, host of the Magnetic Memory Method podcast and disciple of the Memory Palace strategy. Dr. Anthony specializes in helping his clients take a 21st century approach to memorizing names, foreign languages, dreams, and much more, in addition to pushing the boundaries of their mental capacities. If you want to become a more active participant in your life and the world around you, or you just want some tips, tricks, and tools to expanding the power of your mind, then don't go anywhere. Dr. Anthony is going to help you take your brain to the next level.
Dr. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us today. I know the audience is going to get a lot out of today's episode. I love memory. Matter of fact, when we were doing the pre-frame of this podcast, I went to say my first sentence. I completely lost my train of thought. So I hope you can fix me along the way. That'll be worth the hour that we spend here today. So welcome, and man, I'm looking forward to digging into this.
Oh, well, Thor, thanks for having me. And that kind of thing in the mind is completely normal. So the first tip I could give anyone is just to recognize it as part of being human. And there are actually tips and techniques for what you can do when that happens. And there's even a scientific name for some of that stuff. So it's just completely normal. And it even happens to memory champions after they've won the championships.
That's fun. We actually had a memory champion on, about 6 months ago, Ron White, who was a world champion at one point. Fascinating, the techniques that he used in memory, and we're looking forward to learning from you as well today. So, you know, as an entrepreneur, we always struggle with, we've got so much going on, so much is coming at us, and with technology nowadays, I mean, it's just everywhere it's coming at us. What do we do? How do we, it might be normal, but we don't want to be normal. We want to be exceptional. So how do we become exceptional?
Well, Thor, I'm glad you asked that, because one of my deepest concerns is the onslaught of technology and the overwhelm that it's creating, and also an effect that has been called, it's one of those things that I wish I would have come up with it myself because it's so sexy, but it's called digital amnesia.
Oh,
and
nice.
As sexy as it sounds, it is a real effect, and people are suffering from it. And it's more than digital overwhelm. It's actually an effect in which people are not retaining or even processing information from mass digital consumption the way that they would from print books. We don't know exactly why that print might serve memory better, other than it could be space, the actual spatial location of information in the world, because the brain stores information spatially. So, and I'm also glad you mentioned Ron White, because people should go back and listen to your interview with him, because he's incredible at teaching something called the Memory Palace, which I also teach. And that is one of the best ways to deal with digital overwhelm, is to simply recognize that the brain stores information in space. And there is very, very strong evidence that if you can arrange what you need to learn spatially better, then you can get ahead of digital overwhelm. So that doesn't mean throwing away the computers and going on digital fasts, which I'll also recommend, but you don't have to do that. You just need to start thinking about information more spatially and using the way that brains have evolved to learn for thousands of years and stack the chips in your favor. And you can avoid this problem and get ahead.
Well, I definitely recommend a digital fast every single day. Put that phone down at some point, whether you're having dinner with the kids, the wife, the husband, the girlfriend, the boyfriend. For a very short period of time, at the very least, make sure you're putting those things down, because I see so often people are trying to multitask and they're not winning any of the game, either with their family or with their clients or whatever they're doing online. So definitely get some time in there where you're fasting. I love that. Digital fasting. Love that term.
I do it every Sunday, and I try to go for a walk without any device for at least an hour a day. And it's just been a great and a wonderful thing. I read a book recently all about taking these kinds of walks without any sort of distraction. And it really, and he talks about the science of mind wandering, just letting your mind wander, and gives the lists of all the names of the great geniuses who used to do this. And it's really true. You just feel so refreshed, and you can come back in a much more organized and structured way to this avalanche of tabs and links and tweets and notifications and so forth. It's been really wonderful for me.
You know, it's interesting because I do my best thinking when I'm just walking, if I'm in nature, or just, it's kind of like I'm blocking out the rest or just letting my mind wander. Some of the best ideas come to me during that state. What's the brain doing at that point? Is it because of a lack of stimulus coming in, or is there something happening as a result of motion in our body?
Yes, there are chemicals that are produced by the body when you're exercising. And those chemicals, it depends on what the nature of the exercise is. We know that when we do certain things and go to new locations, for example, norepinephrine really kicks in. And norepinephrine is part of the formation of memory. So it can be that we're consolidating memory and having things sifted and sorted, almost like, I really don't like comparing the brain to a computer, but it's almost like defragging in a way.
Yes.
But we also have a deep need for rest, but rest is something that doesn't necessarily mean sleeping or laying around. It also can mean alternate activities that use your same capacities just for a different outcome. So walking can use your capacity to think, but it can be for a different outcome. And just thinking about, oh, that's interesting what that business is doing there. Why are they doing that? You know, it's related to your capacity as an entrepreneur, but it's not your business. So that can be one of the things that happens.
I'm the worst person to go out to dinner with or walk down the street with, because as I'm doing anything, I'm constantly analyzing other businesses. It's hilarious. I'll walk down, I'm like, what were they thinking? What kind of business model is that? They're selling these dresses for $7. The overhead has to be, I start going through the numbers, I'm like, this makes no sense. They're going to be bankrupt before you know it. I'm constantly doing that.
Well, it could be a very healthy thing, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I'm always looking, okay, what's not working? And then I find a business that actually I love, and I'm like, I'll literally go in. I'm like, I got to tell you, I love your business model. I was ran into somebody that has a franchise for cleaning ductwork, either in commercial buildings or in residential buildings. And he told me his model. I'm like, man, I love that low overhead franchise model. You've got everybody has dirty ducts, right? Everybody has stuff in their ventilation system. I'll go off on a tangent here about businesses, right?
Well, it is one of those things where you just want to start giving your consulting services, but people don't action very much on free usually. So
exactly right. That's right.
One wonders what to do.
So with our minds, right? There's so much stimulus coming at us every single day, and our minds are designed to, quite frankly, and this is not a scientific explanation, but to block everything, or not everything out, but block a lot of things out. If we felt and saw every stimulus that was coming at us, we'd go nuts. What part of the brain is there to delete or block all this stimulus coming at us? I mean, like right now, there's the AC unit, the fan is running, there's a bird outside. There's so many things going on, but you don't see or feel everything or process everything. And it seems like with the digital overload, what did you say? The digital, you had
amnesia.
Amnesia, right? Is this additional stimulus causing us to block out more and forget some of the important stuff? What's going on?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. There is something in the brain called the reticular activating system,
RAS,
and
yeah.
that's the thing that you know that you're sitting there in the kitchen and you're working away, and all of a sudden you notice the fridge fan goes off. Have you had that experience?
Yes.
So why is it that we noticed that it went off, but we didn't know that it was on in the first place? Well, that's the reticular activating system. It's actually filtering it out of our experience, and it lets us be alert to change. And the thing is that because of survival needs in the ancient past of human existence, we're very good and alert to change. In fact, we're so primed to be interrupted that this is why we get overwhelmed. It's just built into our nature. And the reticular activating system doesn't have everything to do with it, but it is one of those key filters. And without a healthy functioning reticular activating system, we would be autistic. And maybe we don't need to talk about digital autism. We need to talk about digital amnesia. We need to be talking about digital autism, because that is part of what's happening. And I see it all around the world, and I'm sure you do too. People are at cafes, they're with four other people, and they're staring into their screens while they're talking to other people. That looks like autism to me. And even when you're by yourself, you may notice that, you've got 15 tabs open and you're not really working on any single one of them, and you're just back and forth and back and forth. And that is kind of autism. And it's because you're not able to filter out all of those interruptions, because the brain is naturally evolved to be alert to interruptions. It's a very, very good at it as a survival mechanism. Does that sort of answer your question?
It does. And what's interesting is, we're always looking for a way to be seen and heard in the marketplace. And there are a lot of marketers of businesses that use the shouting method, I call it. They get out there, it's like, who can shout the loudest? Well, pretty soon, all the shouters all kind of sound alike. It kind of gets drowned out. And clients are always looking for that way to stand out without shouting. What other ways can we activate our prospects' RAS?
Well, one of the ways is to really make sure that you have a market to message match, right? And this can be tricky. I think the promise of Facebook ads is maybe a little bit exaggerated, but if you can really hook them at the beginning as having something that is of direct value to them, and make a low investment in their time that creates an immediate relationship where they're going to be expecting follow-up, and then having a rigorous follow-up that continues that conversation, which doesn't mean you don't go for a front-end sale or anything like that. But I'm also talking about ways where you're not dealing with tripwires, because, you don't want customers tripping into your life. That's not necessarily going to be a good thing either. But if you can somehow create a conversation and signal that there's more here, and then use a rigorous follow-up that continually reminds them, based on a real and authentic pain that they're dealing with all the time, and a real authentic solution that you have, then you're going to be able to cultivate more people. And I don't think that that is particularly new, and I don't think it's going to change in the future, no matter what's going on in the technology. You really do have to understand that you will get some people the first time, but you're going to have a need for a longer conversation with the majority, and lead them progressively towards trust, towards understanding your core message, your values, and a demonstration of you being able to show up. And ultimately, that, I think, is the thing that most entrepreneurs struggle with. There's systems that support you to be able to show up on autopilot, but it's got to have those characteristics of continual demonstrations of value matched to a real need that your market is actually having, and a real authentic solution that you actually have.
So let's do kind of a little case study, all right? And I'll be the student here. Doctor, I run a business, and I'm really having a difficult time remembering everything I need to do, remembering names. Help me out here. I think everything's functioning well. I'm just kind of overloaded. Where do you start with students?
Well, I try to target them and see what it is that they're struggling with. So you just mentioned names and times. And so now we know that we have two different techniques that we can work with, and or that I can offer you. And so the first thing that I would do is ask you, either personally or through a survey or some form of automation, which is the deepest concern? Would you like to focus on names first, or would you like to focus on times and dates?
Let's start with names. And first of all, before we continue, so names, times, did I leave anything out? Is there like a third or fourth area?
Well, there certainly is, and that depends on your professional bent, or where what it is that you're doing. So if you have professional terminology to deal with, say you're a digital entrepreneur and you want to learn a bit of programming, then that would be something along the lines of learning code, and there are memory techniques that will serve that. Now, at a certain point, all these memory techniques blend together. Okay. So I'll give you a big overview, and then we can see how it's granular.
Yeah, that's awesome.
One of my successes is by not dodging the fact that there are differences with the techniques, and you can really optimize the techniques so that they work really, really well for those things. And a lot of other people, they just stay at the bird's eye view of what memory techniques can do for you.
Good. And I just want to tee this up ahead of time. You're dealing with someone that can spend 4 hours on the golf course and end up, and when I get home, somebody say, how was golf? Golf was great. Who'd you play golf with? Partner. And they're like, you just spent 4 hours with someone and you don't remember their name? I'm like, nope. So that's what we're going to deal with. Teach me. Help me.
Okay, well, this is great because you have spatial memory on your side, which is the memory palace that I mentioned earlier at the golf course. So the way the bird's eye view here is that the brain is really, really good at remembering certain things that are connected, that have association. And the reason is that the brain, it splits information up when it comes into your mind, and it's distributed through your neural networks. There's neurons and synapses, and these fire in all kinds of crazy ways. But you have an opportunity to actually help sort of guide the way that they fire together and then wire together later by using association. So when I heard your name, for example, Thor Conklin, the first thing that I think of is, it's timely because of the new Thor movie that just came out at the time, just previous to our speaking. But nonetheless, that was really great. But I went further. I thought, who else can I associate this to? And I remember that I had a social studies teacher in high school who was also, his first name was Thor. And then I start to think of more associations. Yeah, on my honeymoon, we actually went to Norway. And so I'm thinking of all these associations and places that I can make connections, because this is how the brain works. It's just multiple neurons and multiple connections. And the more you can connect things, the more that we're able to call information back, because we have more pathways to travel. And so also, I was starting to think of Breaking Bad, and I was thinking, and please, this is always a risk in my job, is that I'm going to offend somebody.
Oh, you can't offend me. that can't happen.
I think it's a challenge for people who come to memory techniques, or some people who come to memory techniques, is they start to judge their imagination. They feel a little bit risque because they're like, that is a little bit, offensive, but it's just something to get over, really, because if it's radical, if it's a bit strange, a bit incongruous, then that actually helps. So I'm starting to think of famous cons, right? So I can remember this Conklin thing, and so Breaking Bad comes to mind, and also Prison Break. And I'm just starting to think of these connections, and then trying to think, oh yeah, well, con in Latin means with. And so I'm starting to put it together, and that's helping me form this association. Now, if you and I were golfing, and we were golfing with 4 other people, I'm going to assume, well, even if you don't know the golf course very well, it's a brand new golf course for you. Golf courses have a certain predictable structure because of the number of the way that the courses are structured, and they tend to have the clubhouse and a parking lot and certain features, maybe a bar, that are just going to be there and that your brain will remember on autopilot. So now, instead of just thinking about, okay, so now we've got Thor, he's at my wedding now in Norway, and he's helping the guys from Prison Break escape from prison, and he's with my dad's girlfriend, whose name was Lynn, previous girlfriend, and I'm now
right.
Putting together this picture, and I'm actually putting it at the first tee. And you're all now in the truck. And I just start building this association with actual space. And so now what ends up happening, because the brain doesn't work in a linear way, I have multiple chances to recall this. And every single T on that game, I'm going to go back to the first one, and I'm going to say, just briefly, what happened there? And I'm going to remember, oh yeah, so Thor with Prison Break, and my dad's girlfriend Lynn was there. Thor Conklin, right? And Latin Lith, like whatever. You have multiple chances bound up with a location in space. And then you're at the second T, and there maybe Roger Hamilton is there, and you just start working on Roger. Then you get to the third T, you go back to the second T, what was there? And so, Roger, well, you associate with the famous film director Roger Corman or some other Roger, or Buck Rogers, and you just build these associations, and you try to create as many as you can, and you bind them all up with a space. And that's
explain the
memory
space
palace
piece.
technique.
I think I'm missing the space concept. Is the space actually being on the golf course at playing? Is that the space, or is it a space in your mind?
That is a combination of your mind and real space. So the memory palace is taking structured space as free resources, because the mind, most minds understand space very easily. You get it for free. You just memorize spaces on autopilot. If you have to think about the journey from your bedroom to your kitchen, like you just remember it. You never actively tried to memorize it, but you can get some kind of image and picture in your mind, I assume. Is that true for you?
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Yes.
Well, it turns out you can get really, really strategic about it, and you can get, I call it impromptu memory palaces. So forgive me if I was skipping ahead there, but I was just thinking if I was on the golf course for the first time, I'd start building it as a memory palace as I went along, knowing that my brain is just basically going to memorize it on just total autopilot, because spatial memory is the strongest memory that we all have. We couldn't do anything without it, and virtually every person has it. And so on that basis, I begin to use other forms of memory. The scientific words for this are episodic memory. So when I'm thinking about the guys from Prison Break and Thor, I'm telling little stories, and they're episodes, and the brain is really good at remembering story. And if they're doing certain actions, which is another thing that I would recommend if you struggle with just the story, is you make sure that Thor is actually doing something to the guys from Prison Break. So your name has the K in it, and I didn't quite have an image for that yet. So I would have like the Cons, maybe they have Krispy Kreme donut or something, and they have that wrapped around my dad's girlfriend Lynn, right? Just to get that K in there, and that is called procedural memory, because they're doing a procedure. So that helps strengthen it even more. There are other words for all these things, but the point is to have the image located somewhere to get the benefit of spatial memory. It is to have a story involved to get the benefit of episodic memory, and have an action. The weirder, the stranger that action is, the better. The more that action is associated to the sound of what it is that you're trying to recall, the more chance that you'll be able to recall it. That said, I used a concept there, which is conceptual memory, which is that con is Latin for with. And so that can be strong as well. One of the challenges here, and it's what I don't skip over in my training, is that each person needs to sort of figure out what are their modes, their mental processing modes. Are you stronger as a visual person? Are you stronger as an auditory person? Do you have a kinesthetic sensibility, or are you more conceptual? Are you maybe auditory conceptual? Do you think in tastes or smells? What is your strength? And when you build a hierarchy, then you're able to understand better and work with these images and start more strategically getting the benefit faster. So you get these quick victories because you understand your preferences in your mind, and each person will have them. Some people don't even have a mind's eye. It's a condition. Well, they call it a condition. I think it's not a disease. They want to turn everything into a disease, but they call it aphantasia or aphantasia, which is the lack of a mind's eye. And a lot of people say, well, I can never do this because I don't see pictures in my mind. Well, neither do I very strongly. I've developed that skill over the years, but it's actually never been a need for me to see any of this in my mind. I just think about it in words and in concepts, and then I work on making it visual. So you don't even really have to see things in your mind. You just have to understand how your imagination works And I help people dive in and think about it a little bit more mechanically than some of the other teachers. And I just have a lot of fun with it, as you maybe can tell from my enthusiasm for all the nuts and bolts of it. But that's how it works. And it's just binding together as many neural connections as you can. And you really won't forget these things because you're giving your brain multiple chances to recall pieces of information by not making the mistake of thinking as any piece of information is a singular unit. It's your brain's going to disperse it and put it all over the place. And so the more you connect it to things that are already in your brain, the more you'll be able to bring it back and consolidate it into a single piece of information again.
Thank you so much for listening today. I really do appreciate your time, and I hope you found today's show valuable. If you would like to receive these shows automatically to your phone or to your computer, simply go to iTunes and subscribe. After listening to several of the shows, if you're so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating, as this helps us reach additional people and spread the message. If you're truly committed to taking your life to the next level and doing whatever it takes to become a peak performer, but something's holding you back, something is blocking your way, and you just can't seem to figure out what it is, send me an email to info@thorconklin.com, and I'd be more than happy to get on the phone with you. We'll schedule a 15-minute discovery call. No obligation, no cost. I absolutely love to hear from the listeners, and if there's something I can do to help, I'd be more than happy to do that. Also, if you found something of great interest in today's show and you want to share that with your friends and family, simply go to my Facebook page, Thor Conklin, click on the episode, hit the share button, and share it on your page. You can follow me at Twitter at Thor Conklin. The website is thorconklin.com. We're constantly adding new free resources, discussing additional tricks, tips, tools, and strategies on how to be a peak performer. Remember, I try to keep these episodes short so you can listen to them during dot time, doing other things, commuting, driving, walking, working out. Decide to be a peak performer in all that you do. And until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day.
Be on the lookout for part 2 of our conversation with Dr. Anthony, where he tells us why print media is easier to recall than digital media, as well as explain the phenomenon behind the Kennedy effect. I'll see you guys on another edition of Peak Performers Podcast.